Hi guys. This is MikroTik. Today, we will go through the very basic configuration of MikroTik Router. Let's begin. For this demo, we are going to use WinBox to manage the MikroTik. It's more convenient to use this application to manage the MikroTik instead of using the web or browser. You can check my other video on how to install this WinBox application. If you are using this application, then you can connect your computer to any port of the MikroTik router. Once connected, then go to Neighbors. This option will automatically detect all the MikroTik devices connected to the same network. You can click refresh to show newly connected or newly detected MikroTik devices. It's very useful, especially if you have multiple MikroTik devices and also if you don't know their IP addresses. This MAC address is the MAC address of the MikroTik port where you connect your computer, which in my case is port 2. The IP address is still zeros because we haven't configured the IP address of this port or interface yet. If you are using the web browser to manage the MikroTik router, then you can use the default IP address, which is 192.168.88.1, but you have to connect your computer to port 1. This depends on the MikroTik model. Some models are using different ports, like this CCR2004 is using port 15. Next is identity. For other brands, this is the hostname. Version is the router OS firmware version, which in my case is 7.6. You can also check my other video on how to upgrade MikroTik router firmware. Board is the MikroTik model. Lastly, the uptime, which is how long the device is up and running. Now, if you look at the Connect to, it's blank. You need to select which device you want to manage. Simply click on it and you can see the MAC address will be added. Next is we will enter the username and password. By default, the username is admin with no password. Some models with password, you can check it on the sticker. You can click on add or set if you want it to be on managed devices. I will show you later on how to do that. If we look at the top right window, we have the option to keep password, which is enabled by default. This is very useful, no need to enter your password every time you want to access the device. Auto reconnect is also enabled. This will auto reconnect you to the device if in case you're disconnected. You can also enable open in new tab if you have multiple MikroTik devices. It will open each device to separate windows. Now, click connect. You will see the router OS default configuration pop up. This will show some configuration suggestions. Also from here, you can see the IP address pre-configured on port 15, which is 192.168.88.1. You can click on remove configuration or click OK to proceed. Next is we are required to change the password. The default password is blank, so we will leave it blank. We just enter our new password and also we need to confirm it. Click change now to proceed. We are now logged into the MikroTik router. If you look at the title bar, we can see that we are logged in as admin through the MikroTik interface MAC address. This is because we access the device using the MAC address. If you access the device using the IP address, then the IP address will be shown here, not the MAC address. Same goes with the dynamic DNS. Behind is the hostname, which we will change later. You can also see the router OS firmware version 7.6, which is running on this device model CCR2004. The last one is the CPU architecture. If we look at the top right, we can see date and time. To show other options, you can go to dashboard. Date and time are already there, so we will show the rest. We will show the CPU process. The CPU monitoring has been added. We can also show the memory process and the device uptime. To remove the monitoring process, simply right-click on it, then choose Remove. Next is we will create an administrator user account. It is strongly recommended not to use the admin user account for better security. Go to System, Users. You can see the system default user, which is the admin user. Tick on it to edit. The minus sign is to remove or delete. The check sign is to enable and the X sign is to disable. We are going to add new users, so we will choose the plus sign. Now, enter your desired username. For this demo, we will use Jack. For the group, we have few options: full, read and write. Since we are creating an admin account to manage the device, then we will choose full. Full means we are able to read and write the configuration. Enter your desired password, then also confirm it. Click Apply or OK to save the changes. Since we already have a new administrator user, which is Jack, then we can delete the admin user account. Simply tick on it to select, then choose the minus sign to remove or delete. We have now one user left. You can create multiple administrator user accounts if you want. Next is we will change the hostname. Go to System. Choose Identity. Enter your desired hostname. Before you click OK, notice the MikroTik at the title bar will be changed to the new hostname. Click OK. Notice that the hostname has been changed. Now, let's disconnect and then reconnect using the newly created administrator user account. To disconnect, go to Sessions, then choose Disconnect. Let's now log in using the new administrator user account. We will modify the username and password using the new account. Once we click Add or Set, then this device will be under Manage Devices. Click on it. Now you can see it's under Manage Devices. Notice also the new administrator user account. Now, click on it to select, then Connect. We are now logged in using the newly created account and also the new hostname. Let's now configure the LAN and WAN interfaces. Go to Interfaces. Let's first configure the LAN, which is port 2. Notice that there's an R on the status. You can hover your cursor over it. The R means running. Notice that there's also traffic running on this interface. It's because this laptop is connected to this interface. RX means received and TX means transmitted. Now, click on it to edit. We will modify the name. We will add LAN for our reference, since this would be our LAN interface. Click OK to apply the changes. Notice the name has been modified. Let's now create address for this interface. Go to IP. Choose Addresses. Click on the plus sign to add. Now, enter your desired address. For this demo, we will use 10.1.1.254 with /24 subnet mask. 10.1.1.254 would be the gateway. You can leave the network blank, it will automatically be filled later on. Next is we have to choose the interface where we want to assign this address. We will choose the LAN interface, which is port 2. Click OK to apply. We have now this address which is assigned to port 2 or the LAN interface. Next is we will configure the DHCP server for this interface. Go to IP. Since this will be the DHCP server for the LAN network, then we will choose DHCP server. Under DHCP, choose DHCP setup. For the interface, we will choose where we want to assign the DHCP server, in our case is the port 2 or the LAN. Click Next. DHCP address space is the network address. Click Next. The DHCP gateway is 10.1.1.254. Click Next. This is the DHCP address range. This will be the IP addresses received by the DHCP client, like your computer and other devices. You can modify based on your preference. Starting IP would be 10.1.1.100 until 10.1.1.200. You can add more DHCP range by clicking on the down arrow. You can configure multiple DHCP range if you prefer. To remove or delete a DHCP range, simply click on the up arrow. Click Next to apply. Next is the DNS server. This would be the DNS IP address received by the DHCP clients. If you have your own DNS server, then you may enter the DNS server IP address. If you don't have DNS server, then we can use the free public DNS. Google DNS as our primary. We can also add Cloudflare DNS as our secondary. Click Next to proceed. Next is the lease time. This is how long the DHCP client will hold the IP address. By default, It's set to 10 minutes, which is too short. We will set it to 1 day. This means, the DHCP server will automatically renew the DHCP client's IP addresses after 24 hours or 1 day. Click Next to apply. Setup has completed successfully. You can now see the newly created DHCP server. We can rename it for our reference. Simply double-click on it. Since this is for our LAN, then we will give a name of LAN DHCP to make it simple. Click OK to apply. The DHCP has now been renamed. We can check the Network tab. Here, you can also see the details, the network address, the gateway and the DNS servers. Since my laptop is connected to this interface, then it should already receive IP address and DNS. We can check to verify. We will check my IP settings. Open a command prompt and enter the command ipconfig/all. You can see that this PC network interface is set to DHCP. It received the IP address of 10.1.1.200. You can see the default gateway is 10.1.1.254. Also, you can see the DNS servers received, which are the Google DNS and Cloudflare DNS. We can check this IP address from the DHCP pool. We can go to IP. Choose Pool. You can see the DHCP pool or DHCP range we created earlier. We received the last IP address of the DHCP pool. Unlike other brands, the first device connected will receive the first IP address on the DHCP pool. We can also test the ping the gateway IP address, which is 10.1.1.254. We should be able to reach, which we can. Later on, I will show you also how to bridge multiple interfaces. It will act like a physical switch. We can configure multiple interfaces to be on the same network. Next is we will configure the WAN interface. We will configure this port 1 to be our WAN interface. We can modify the name. We can add WAN for our reference, since this will be our WAN interface. We have now the LAN and WAN interface. For this WAN interface, we will configure it as DHCP. It will automatically receive IP address from the ISP router. Go to IP. Choose DHCP client. Under DHCP client, click the plus sign to add. Under DHCP, choose the interface, which in our case is the port 1. Next is the add default route. If you choose yes, then no need to configure the default static route, it will automatically create the default static route. Choose no if you want to manually configure the default static route, which I will show you later on. For now, we will choose yes. Click OK to apply the changes. You can see the color is red and the status is stopped. This is because I haven't plugged the cable to port 1 yet. Notice the changes if I will plug the cable from my ISP router. The color changed to black and the status to bound. You can also see the IP address received by this interface, which will expire after 24 hours. Add default route is yes, so we don't need to configure the default static route. We can verify by going to IP. Routes. Notice that we have the default route automatically added. Destination address is 0.0.0.0/0 means all or anything, and the gateway, which is my ISP router. This means the LAN network is already routed to the internet. Distance is 1. No need to worry about this distance for now, unless you have multiple ISP or you want to configure VPN. Next is we will configure the SNAT or source NAT. Go to IP. Choose Firewall. Under NAT, click on the plus sign to add new NAT rule. First process is go to Action tab. Under Action, choose Masquerade. Next is go to General tab. Under Chain, choose SRC NAT or Source NAT. Source NAT translates multiple private addresses inside a local network to a public IP address before accessing the internet. Click OK to apply the changes. You can see the newly created NAT rule. Notice my network icon. It will change to Internet Access. This means, internal users can now access the internet. We can open back the command prompt and test ping Google DNS, which we can. We can also test to ping google.com, which we can. We can now access the internet through this MikroTik router. We need also to set the date and time. This is very useful for troubleshooting or checking the logs. Go to System. Choose Clock. Notice the date and time is not set. The year is still 1970. Also, the time zone is not set. To set the date and time, go to System again. Choose NTP Client. Tick Enable. Mode is unicast. For the NTP servers, we will enter pool.ntp.org. We can add more servers, asia.pool.ntp.org. Click Apply. The status changed to waiting. Means it's now synchronizing to NTP servers. Notice the status is already synchronized. If we check the date, you can see it's already synchronized. Next is the time. You have to change the time zone based on your geographical location. Go to Manual Time Zone. I'm currently in Malaysia right now, so my time zone is +8. Click Apply to save the changes. If we go back to Time tab, you can see that the date and time are already synchronized. Time Zone Auto Detect is enabled, so it will auto detect your time zone later on. You can also update it now if you want. Expand the down arrow and choose your geographical location. Click Apply. It will synchronize again to the NTP servers. Wait for it to synchronize. If it's taking too long to synchronize, then disable the NTP and then enable it back again for it to refresh the connection to NTP servers. It's now fully synchronized. Now, everything is set. Even if you restart the MikroTik device, it will still be synchronized as long as you follow the process. Now, if you want to bridge some of the unused ports to the LAN network, then follow this process. I usually bridge unused ports to the LAN so that it will not be wasted. We are going to bridge this port 2 to 5. To do this, go to Bridge. Under Bridge tab, click on the plus sign to add a new interface. Since this is for our LAN, then we will give it a name of LAN Bridge for our reference. Click OK to apply the changes. We can now see the newly created bridge interface. Now, we need to add the ports to this bridge interface. Go to Ports. Click on the plus sign to add ports. Under General. On the interface, we need to add first the running port, which in my case is port 2. We are going to add this to the LAN bridge interface we just created. Click Apply to save the changes. You can see that we already added port 2 to our LAN bridge. We will do the same process to the other ports. To make it faster, we can simply copy the first binding we created. Click Copy and it will clone to a new window. We can simply change the interface only since LAN bridge is already selected. Click OK to save the changes. Notice that port 3 has been added to LAN bridge. We will do the same process for ports 3, 4 and 5. Well, you can add more ports if you want. We have now added ports 2 to 5. Notice that there's an S sign on the status. Hover your cursor over it. S means slave. For port 2, which we are currently connected to, the status is RS, this is the master port. Next is we need to change the LAN address and LAN DHCP binding interface to this LAN bridge. Go to IP. Addresses. You can see the LAN network is bonded to port 2 as we configured earlier. We need to modify it and change to the LAN bridge we just created. Again, LAN bridge is the group of this port 2 to 5. Click OK to apply. You can now see that the LAN network is bonded to LAN bridge. Next is we will modify the DHCP server. Go to IP. Choose DHCP server. Under DHCP, you can see that there's an error. Server cannot run on slave interface. Double-click to edit. We have to change the interface to the LAN bridge. Click OK to apply. Now, the error disappeared, which means the config is now valid. You can now connect any device to this bridge LAN ports 2 to 5 and they will be on the same network. Let's test if we can still access the internet. Let's open back the command prompt and test to ping google.com, which we can. This means the bridge is working. Next is we are going to change the WAN interface to a static IP address. This is if you want to use a static IP address instead of DHCP or if you have a fixed WAN IP address. Also, we will manually configure the default static route. First is we will remove the DHCP client we configured for this WAN interface. Go to IP. DHCP client. You can see the DHCP client we configured earlier. We can also check the default static route which has been automatically added earlier. We can remove this DHCP client and the default static route will be also removed. Click on it to select, then click the minus sign to remove. Notice the default static route has also been removed. We will now set a static IP address on the WAN interface. Go to IP. Addresses. You can see the address for the LAN we created earlier. Click on the plus sign to add a new address. For the address, you need to set an IP address that is in the same subnet with your ISP router. Also, make sure the IP address is not in use. If you are using fixed WAN IP address, then it's the same process. Next is to choose the interface for this subnet. In our case, we will choose our WAN interface, which is port 1. Click OK to apply the changes. You can see the newly created address. Next is we will configure the default static route. Go to IP. Routes. Click on the plus sign to add new routes. The destination is 0.0.0.0/0 means all or anything. For the gateway, you need to enter your ISP router's IP address. Click OK to apply the changes. You can see the newly created route. This means, you are allowing internal users to access anything on the internet through your ISP router. If you look at the status, it shows active. It means, this route is already running. We can test by opening again a command prompt and test to ping google.com, which we can. If you want to configure PPPoE on your WAN interface, then you can also check my other video. If you notice, there's a Windows option at the bottom left. You can click on it. You can use this option to switch to different tabs which are currently running or currently open. Well, that's all for today's demonstration, and I really hope you liked this video. If you are new to my channel, please don't forget to like, share, subscribe and click on the notification bell for more amazing tutorials. Thank you and see you on the next video.